episode 8, seeing that Rick hasn't moved from the same spot he's been in. As Herschel's family starts mourning their dead relatives, Shane starts going crazy, thinking that Herschel knew that Sophia was in the barn the whole time. And Rick and Shane get into another heated conversation, and it's definitely not going to end too good with these two. We see that they all have a memorial for every one of the dead and Sophia as they gather all the others and get ready to burn the bodies. We see that Maggie ends up asking Glenn if he'd stay if she wanted him to, and he just says, yeah, of course. And then Maggie's sister Beth ends up collapsing. Maggie ends up figuring out that Herschel's gone. He also has his flask out, so he's definitely at the bar, so Rick's going to find him, and Glenn's going with him. This time, Lori's mad that Rick's going, and Shane's still mad too because why they need Herschel. So on the way to get Herschel, they end up talking about how Glenn likes Maggie, and he's scared that she only likes him because he's the last man on Earth, and Rick says not to care about it and just enjoy time while it's lasting. Everyone ends up taking care of Beth, while Lori ends up asking Daryl to go look for Rick and them, and Daryl says he's not his airman and to do it herself. Rick ends up finding Herschel, and Herschel ends up opening up saying that he never noticed that the walkers were actually walkers, and he feels really stupid. And stupidly enough, Lori actually does take a car, but as she pulls out her maps and looks at it, a walker hits the car, making her turn it and end up flipping the car. Rick ends up calming down Herschel, so Herschel ends up ready to go. But as soon as they're about to leave, this dude named Dave and Tony end up coming inside. And off the rip, they're suspicious because they took the time to look at their cars and see if they were living in it or not. So Rick says, no, we live on a farm, but we're not going to let y'all stay. So Tony starts getting mad. He asks one more time where he could stay, and Rick tells him he can go somewhere else, and that's where he tries to reach for his gun, and Rick shoots both of them without any hesitation. And Shane, Andrea, and T-Dog end up burning the bodies. And we're back with episode 9, seeing that Lori hasn't woken up, but she needs to soon as this walker tries to break through the glass. We see that we're exactly back with Rick, Glenn, and Herschel as they end up hearing more people asking for their friends. Lori manages to get out of the car and find her gun and kill both walkers, while Rick and the others get into a shoot fight with these people. Herschel gets his gun and grabs the shotgun and tosses it to Glenn. As Glenn's about to make his way out, he ends up freezing behind a trash can, getting scared. So Rick comes out, both guns wielding, trying to look for Glenn to make sure he's okay. Herschel manages to kill one of the men, so the others in the truck leave as this man has to jump. We see that kid's landing wasn't good because he landed straight on his leg. Herschel says there's no time to have a procedure, so Rick just has to pull his leg straight up. We see that Shane actually went looking for Lori, but actually lied to her and told her that Rick was back there, which she ain't too happy about. Maggie tries to be happy when Glenn gets back, but he just shuts down because he's just mad that he ended up freezing because he blames it on her. Makes no sense. Next morning, as Lori and Rick are talking about Shane, they end up getting deep into it, and Lori says that she's actually scared about Shane. Says she feels unsafe and says Shane just thinks it's his baby and only his. Rick and Shane are going to be having a talk, or else. And we see that we're back with episode 10, starting out in the future again. We see a beat up Shane running away from walkers, getting into a bus. And it definitely looks like he's not going to be able to hold it any longer. We cut back to before that a little bit, in which Rick tells Shane to get out of the car so he can have a talk. Rick ends up saying that he's scaring Lori, so he tells him to stop or he's going to knock his teeth out. He ends up telling Shane to agree, and Shane ends up agreeing. So they end up pulling out the stranger that they tied up and find an enclosed fenced place to take out and leave for him to stay at, where he ends up seeing that Beth's trying to hide knives because she's acting suicidal. They're just about to leave the boy until Shane about just point blank shoots him. Rick tells him no, and Shane tells him he can't take care of his family, so they start fighting. It ends up going back and forth as they beat each other up, while Randall, the random stranger, is trying to get this knife. And we see after their fight that we're back exactly where we were in the beginning, as Shane is trapped. But the Randall kid ends up telling Rick they should leave, so they end up leaving. But of course they end up coming back, letting Randall drive as Rick shoots to get the walkers away. Shane jumps in the car, and as soon as they get the car stopped, they put Randall's headphones and blindfold back on. And Rick ends up saying if he really wants to kill him, that he's gonna have to do better than a wrench. As they end up driving back in silence, we end up seeing a lonely walker. And we're back with episode 11. We see that they did bring Randall back, and now Daryl's interrogating him. He ends up spelling out that his group actually had a bunch of men, like 20 or 25, and he says that they actually sexually abused women, and Daryl isn't having that. We see that everyone wants to kill Randall now, but Dale is the only one that wants to keep him alive, trying to convince Rick. He even tries to talk to Andrea, and Andrea thinks he'd be better dead, even going out of his way to ask Daryl, and Daryl says that the group's broken, so it don't matter what happens. So Rick's being very nervous, talks to Lori about how this is going to be his first time ever executing someone. And while Herschel's out, Dale even tries to ask Herschel, and Herschel ends up saying that he would rather him be dead because he don't want him around his girls. Carl, being the most stupidest kid, like I hate him as a kid, ends up going out and seeing a walker, as Glenn and Herschel end up talking, because Herschel ends up wanting to get to know Glenn since he knows that Maggie likes him. Now Carl, trying to be cool, he tries to shoot the walker, but the walker actually ends up getting out of the mud. So Carl gets away and runs. And now we see that everyone's finally here, and everyone's decision counts. Dale says they're gonna lose piece of being human for doing this, but most people voted for him to die. So as Rick's about to shoot him point blank in the head, Carl tries to watch, so Rick doesn't do it. Dale, being mad, goes on his little walk, ends up getting attacked by a walker. As the team try to run up to him, they see that the walker opened his guts up, and Dale can't survive, so Rick's about to shoot him, but he can't, so Daryl has to do it, and that's the end of Dale. And we see we're back with episode 12, as Shane, Andrea, Daryl, and T-Dog end up going to find some walkers to kill, as Rick's voice overlays talking about how Dale was a great person and how he said the group was broken and that they need to fix that. And then we finally cut back to Rick actually talk about the ceremony. Rick says he's picking Daryl over Shane, and Shane says why not pick him? And Rick says because he wants Daryl, not him. And we see that Carl gives the gun back to Shane because the walker that killed Dale was actually the one that Carl let free. So Rick and Daryl end up trying to figure out what they should do to look for their team, while Glenn has to sadly work on the RV by himself that Dale taught him to do. And then Rick gets into an important talk to Carl about how his dad's gonna die and his mom's gonna die eventually, and that he just needs to be ready for it. But since T-Dog's in case of Randall, he ends up going to check the barn to see if he's there, and he ends up being gone. We find out that, of course, Shane took him, and he ends up explaining to the boy that all he wants him to do is show him where his team is so he could be a part of their team now. But as soon as they keep walking, Shane ends up snapping his neck, and to cover the evidence, he ends up hitting his face on a tree to make himself bleed. He gets back to the group and tells them that Glenn and Daryl need to go this way and that Shane and Rick need to go the other way. Daryl tries to watch the tracks, but Shane just tells them that they need to go, which is weird. Glenn and Daryl end up finding a walker, which ends up being Randall, but he doesn't have any bite marks and turned to a walker. The only thing wrong with him was his neck was twisted. And that's where we finally put everything together. Shane brought Rick all the way out here just so he could kill him. So Rick tries to talk to him and even tries to give him his gun. But as soon as he gets close, he knifes Shane straight in the stomach and ends up killing him while his gun goes off. And for some odd random reason, Carl was outside at this time. He ends up pointing his gun out and ends up shooting Shane down. Carl asks how Shane got bit as Rick just sits and mourns his body. But little do they know they need to turn around because the whole horde of walkers are on their way. And we're back with the season finale. we end up seeing the city of Atlanta's kind of ghost town right now. And that's because this horde has been hoarding up for a while, walking throughout the days. And of course, these walkers have to be going to the fence at the barn that we know. And we see that this huge horde of walkers was started from a gunshot of Shane's gun. Daryl and Glenn get back saying, "Where's Rick?" because Randall got his neck snapped and Shane was awfully close on footprints. They also talk about how his neck was snapped but he was still a walker. Which, back to where Rick and Carl were about to talk about that, Rick's about to say it as he ends up seeing the big horde of walkers. Back at the house, Lori's freaking out because she don't know where Carl is because Carl left. Rick and Carl end up making it to the barn where they douse it with gasoline, and Rick climbs up as Carl sets him on fire. The whole crew end up trying to come out to help, in which Daryl tells Jimmy to pull the RV over there to see if Rick's over there, and it saves Rick and Carl's life, but it kills Jimmy. Lori, Beth, and the others end up trying to run, but Amy gets grabbed. Carol almost gets killed, but T-Dog, Andrea, Lori, and Beth end up showing up. But while Andrea was saving Carol, it looks like a walker takes Andrea down, in which she actually shot him. Maggie and Glenn have no choice but to run away. Rick and Carl ends up meeting back with Herschel and tells them that they need to go. While Andrea tries to wave them down, she's too late, so she takes the guns and runs. As Daryl watches the place crumble, he ends up hearing Carol, in which he goes to save her. So we see that Rick, Carl, and Herschel made it back to where Sophia was at on the highway, but Lori's not back, so Carl's not going anywhere without his mom. Rick explains to Carl that they're just gonna have to leave and they don't have a choice. But as soon as they're about to leave, everyone shows up in their cars. They're all reunited, but Shane died, Amy died, and Jimmy died. Group says they need to look for Andrea, but Rick says she's definitely dead. Which she definitely isn't. She's been running this whole time from walkers. But as the crew keeps asking about how Shane changed, Rick ends up opening up finally about what Jenner told him. Jenner basically told them that they were all infected, so anyway they all die, they end up turning into walkers. And as Lori holds on to Rick, saying that Shane probably died for a good reason, Rick ends up telling her that he killed Shane, and the reason he killed Shane was because Shane wouldn't stop trying to ruin his family, and all he wanted to do was kill him. As Lori tries to take it in, Rick tries to hold her, and she doesn't look like she likes him anymore. See back with Andrea that she's still been running, but she almost dies until she has a person save her. Like, who is this, Assassin's Creed? Rick ends up telling the group that if they don't want to stay and listen to him, they can go anywhere, but he's their best chance to live. He tells everyone how he killed Shane, and as everyone takes it in, we see that the group might find them a new place to stay. That's the end of Season 2, and I'll see y'all at Season 3. See y'all.